It's now time for The Journal, WBGU-TV's award-winning public affairs program, with your host, Steve Kendall. This is where your community matters. Local people, local issues.
Hello and welcome to The Journal. I'm Steve Kendall. Ken Burns' series Country Music tells the story of country music from its roots in ballads, hymns, minstrel music, and the blues, from very small settings to worldwide popularity as he goes through the 20th century. Joining us to talk about country music in general, especially classic country music, is Toni Taylor from the local country station 107.7 The Wolf. So Toni, thanks for being here with us on Journal.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Now, Ken Burns is going to span from like the 30s into the mid-90s. Most of us consider all of that classic country, some of it very early, some of it, but the 90s now is considered classic country. So talk a little about the station you work at, the things you do, and let's talk a little about what classic country is, because we're talking Hank Williams, Johnny Cash, Bill Monroe, that kind of thing, all the way up through the mid-90s.
Right.
So talk a little about what classic country is now compared to maybe what it was.
Well, classic country to me is exactly all of those things that you just pointed out. That's exactly what I grew up on. My mom, instilled classic country into all of us. So, we're all pretty versed on that. Our station, 107.7 The Wolf, we play hot country music, and we also play classics. We play Patsy Cline. We play Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson, and a lot of the 90s classics as well. Okay,
yeah. And it's funny because there are all these different terms for all kinds of music: modern country, hot country, classic country. When you go to blend like a Johnny Cash song with today's music, how does that's got to be kind of a delicate balance, because country music, like everything else, has evolved over time, and what sounded like a guitar, an upright bass, and the drums, and Johnny Cash singing has become a totally different genre now in terms of the musical composition.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of the music that's out now, they call it bro country.
Oh, okay.
And
bro country.
The bro country is like Luke Bryan and Jason Aldean and the fun-loving guys, with their trucks and talking about a lot of the same things that classic country artists talked about as well, such as alcohol and that kind of thing as well, but and women
and broken hearts
absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's more of a fun I guess, fun-loving. Florida Georgia Line is one of the biggest ones with that. Right. And the bro country infuses rock influences as well as country influences and top 40 and hip hop with it. So I think that's why they call it bro country.
Bro country, yeah. And you see, as you look at stuff, because back in the early 70s, there was this sort of country rock kind of thing that developed with the Eagles and the Byrds and people like that. And that sort of was the precursor of what country music became, because it put rock music together with country music.
Right.
When you look at some of that stuff, you look at a Johnny Cash song or a Hank Williams song and compare it, who would be, artists like that today, who would be considered like today's Johnny Cash? Is there somebody like that? Is that, that's an iconic figure, but is there somebody who sort of, that's their heritage kind of, and that's what they touch base with?
There's a couple of artists that stand out in my mind right now that are pretty rooted in the traditional country sound, and that would be Luke Combs and Chris Stapleton. Two very hot artists right now on the country music scene, and the Zac Brown Band is pretty close in that.
Tied right in there
too. So we have, when you were asking, how we fit all of that in with, playing the new stuff, we have buffers in between, but a lot of our music that we do play, does have the classic, the traditional, traditional country sound to it. We still play George Strait, a lot of George Strait, and George Strait even has some new stuff out right now. So he's keeping his string of number ones going.
Is that right? Okay. Now where would somebody like Buck Owens, which is the Bakersfield kind of country sound?
Oh yeah.
Is there Dwight Yoakam is sort of, and again, I know now we're going back a ways because Dwight Yoakam's been around for a lot longer than people like to think. Is there still a thread of that kind of country that loops through somewhere? Is there somebody who sort of does that as well, or not anymore? Not so much?
Not so much that we play, but you know, Dwight Yoakam is definitely one of the artists that we do still play, and yeah, he had a great thing with Buck Owens and that sound out in Bakersfield, California.
Yeah, with the cowboy hat pulled down so you couldn't see. Yeah. Now, the other thing that's kind of happened a little bit too, and I noticed just recently when they were doing the CMA Awards, there was a lot of concern that women country artists are having a more difficult time being stars or being popular, because for a long time there were huge numbers of women singers, women artists, and that was what country music really became. So it's sort of swung differently. So there was concern that a lot of them there weren't as many women nominated for the various awards in country music. So that's another shift that's going on, at least temporarily.
Yeah, I think that all culminates too with that whole bro country thing. Where women feel that they're not getting enough airplay, or that there's not enough women in the business right now.
Right.
Because there are a lot of men.
Sure. And it does seem like, and it's probably true of all forms of music, but with country too, there seems to be a lot of new artists on a regular basis. I mean, every week it seems there's some new singer, some new band, that kind of thing that's very hot. And some of them last a long time. Some of them, as is typical in music, are here for a few songs and then they kind of go away. So is that, how do you guys, briefly, because we're going to come up on a little bit of a break here, how do you guys select the new artists? Because you've got this huge pool of talent to draw from. So how do you decide what new songs actually become part of this?
Well, our program director is also our music director, and he's in charge of what gets played and what gets added every week. So I think the influx of all of the new younger artists is coming from that pop music type genre that country music has infused with it now.
Okay. Well, we're going to come back in a moment more with Toni Taylor. Right now we're going to take a look at a very short clip of Ken Burns' country music. We'll be back in just a moment on Journal.
All of its children had come to the Mother Church of Country Music. It was almost like a badge of honor that you had to bring your culture with you to the table. That's why Bob Wills and his guys brought us Western music. That's why Hank Williams brought the South with him from honky tonks. Johnny Cash brought the Black Lamb Dirt of Arkansas. Bill Monroe brought music out of Kentucky bluegrass music. Willie Nelson brought his poetry from Texas. Patsy Cline brought her heartache from Virginia. I mean, it was the most wonderful parade of sons and daughters of America that brought their hearts and their souls and their experiences, and it gave us a great era in country music.
Thank you for staying with us here on The Journal. Our guest is Toni Taylor from 107.7 The Wolf, and we're talking country music, Ken Burns' country music documentary, 16 hours tracing the history of country music from the 30s up to the mid-90s. We were talking about some classic artists, and people like Patsy Cline, Johnny Cash. There was an evolution there that took place with artists like Chris Christopherson, Waylon Jennings, because country music has evolved, as we'll watch in this documentary. From these small single little events going on, people kind of just traveling around to small venues, this worldwide, huge stadium shows, that kind of thing. When you talk about the classic artists, though, where do the changes start to take place from, say, like a Patsy Cline or a Hank Williams to the artists we have today? What's that transition been like?
Well, I think when we're transitioning from the classic artists, such as the forefathers of country music, such as Bob Wills, who did Texas Swing, and Jimmy Rogers, who had the very first country music song to ever sell 1 million records. I think there was the shift when Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson and you know, those type of artists came in, and that was more of like an outlaw kind of country.
Right.
And I think there's really a resurgence of that right now. People love the outlaw country sound, and a couple of artists that I mentioned earlier, like Luke Combs and Chris Stapleton, they exude that sort of sound about them, and I think that's one of the reasons why they're so widely popular.
Yeah, well, and Johnny Cash, started out, it was Johnny Cash, and I think the Tennessee 3 or something, which was an upright bass, a guy with a real small drum kit, and then a guitar player of some kind. And one of the things, though, you don't hear as much of, at least in a lot of the songs too, is the instrumentation's different. It's become more rock sounding or pop sounding.
Right.
Steel guitars, banjos, kind of I wouldn't say bluegrass, but things that used to be a real staple of country music. Still happens once in a while, but most of the music is different, is based differently.
Right.
Yeah. And you look, how does because you're mixing these songs together, that's probably a little tricky in some ways.
Yeah, I think that that's what the steel guitar, the banjos, the fiddles, that's what to me brings that country sound, the traditional country sound. And a lot of the artists have taken that out of their sound now, and so that's why it seems a lot more like pop music. And a lot of pop artists are actually doing records.
Crossing over into,
they're doing records with country artists, I don't know if it's just to sell more records or, if there's just this shift or this want for it, but.
It's interesting because like a lot of genres, you do get that sort of blending and transitioning going. Because I can remember, the early '70s, the late '60s, you had the Eagles in the early '70s, and that was considered country rock. And now you listen to that and go, well, that's almost like soft rock in comparison now. The Byrds, the Flying Burrito Brothers, things like that, which became sort of the initial sound of country rock, but now that would be almost considered not even country-ish in comparison.
Right.
And it's interesting too because you look at somebody like a Waylon Jennings, who started out as part of Buddy Holly and the Crickets, so he came from a rock and roll background. Johnny Cash, rock and roll with Sam Phillips, Carl Perkins, all those people, a lot of them, their start was in rock and roll, but of course they grew up with early country music.
Absolutely.
So that they sort of blended that in along the way, so kind of pulled country music and rock music together even before we knew that's what they were doing.
Right.
Yeah. Now, Johnny Cash songs, so what would be, for instance, like some of the Johnny Cash that would play on your stage? Because he's recorded, thousands of songs?
Yeah, hundreds of songs. We play I Walk the Line, Ring of Fire.
Ring of Fire,
I mean, the ones that pretty much everyone knows. The standards, absolutely.
Yeah. It's funny because one song I always thought was the funniest song Johnny Cash did was the thing where he builds the Cadillac at the factory over like one piece at a time. Over 50 years he builds a Cadillac or something. But that was a typical sort of workman's sort of country. We're on the job doing this is what we do kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's another difference in classic country and country now, where classic country, they talked about or sang about what was going on, life. What was going on in their life and what was important in their life, and
the day-to-day sort of mundane things that somehow, and I guess that's the genius of being a songwriter, is you can take something that's an everyday occurrence and make people feel that it's important to them and they can see themselves in that song. Now, because one of the subtitle of this Ken Burns thing is The Story of America One Song at a Time, and that's really what country music is. It tells the history of
someone's
the country.
Life.
Yeah, exactly, when we look at the more modern country, which again is much more pop and rock and almost hip hop, almost just totally a kind of a mishmash of all the different styles.
Right.
And yet then I'll see somebody like an Alan Jackson, who for a long time was the face of a huge star. He's now almost like an elder statesman kind of. He's not but then I'll see a song called like I'm Putting Some Gravel Under My Travel or something, which is sort of back to that typical country music title that you'd get from the 50s, the 60s, that sort of like, this is what we do. So it's a story song.
Right,
it's a story
absolutely.
song. Are there any artists right now, and we've talked a little about any that kind of really have tied back into that directly? I mean, you mentioned a couple of them earlier. They're still kind of classic in their approach that are going to be, that's who they are, they're not going to change?
There is an artist that's out right now. He's a newer artist called Cody Johnson.
Okay.
And Cody Johnson he is actually a cowboy. He used to ride bulls and broncs, and he is now a country music singer, and he's fantastic. And all of his songs sound like traditional country music. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah. So that must be, and I guess that's the other genius, I think, of country music. It allows all of those styles to be a part of that big painting that's a country music station or country music listeners. Everything from a Buck Owens to, a singer of a totally different approach, but it's all country music.
Right.
So,
there's a lot of artists out right now that are actually singing about the classic country artists, which I find extremely interesting, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
think it's great to keep
keep
them alive.
Yeah, we talk about that when we come back. We'll watch another clip of Ken Burns' country music, and then we'll be back here on The Journal with Toni Taylor.
I'm so lonesome I could cry.
Country music comes from right in here. This heart and soul that we all have.
You can dance to it, you can make love to it, you can play it at a funeral. It has something in it for everybody.
Country music is about human emotions. We're always looking for those topics that are going to tell us a lot about who we are, not just to the era that we cover, but who we are now.
If you want to look for like super strong women telling really amazing stories, you went to country.
I mean, the songs are just life. I've seen it or I've lived it. And I never would tell my husband which one was.
I believe that you can go look and find a country song that will help you feel better. Sometimes it might make you cry, but you'll feel better.
This is the story of a uniquely American art form that sometimes gets defined as three chords and the truth. And the people who made it, created it, and how it became a business.
Hello, I'm Johnny Kay.
My dad, he worked out all of his problems on stage. That's where he took his anguish and fears and griefs, and he worked them out with an audience. That's just who he was.
I hope that when people hear of this series, that they'll tune in. It made a convert out of me. It's a wonderful story.
Crazy, I'm crazy.
I always thought it was a really good song, and I played it for Patsy Cline, and she thought it was a great song.
It's phenomenally great music about people who felt their stories weren't being told. I think that's utterly American.
I could cry.
Thank you for staying with us here on The Journal. We're talking with Toni Taylor from 107.7 The Wolf, and the topic is country music, Ken Burns' country music documentary, 16 hours from the 30s into the mid-90s. When we left the last segment, you were talking about some current artists, some new artists, who are singing about basically their forefathers and foremothers in country music.
Right.
Talk a little about how they're looking back at the people that really made their careers now possible by anchoring country music back then.
I mean, I think it's great that they're paying homage to a lot of the classics, and bringing them to the minds of the younger generation who may not have known about these artists. And I think that when you listen to a song that talks about George Strait or Joe Diffie, or even we're even going back even further than that, maybe some of the younger generation will say, hey, who are they talking
and go
about?
back and start listening to
exactly. Because when I go to shows, no matter what show I go to, I've been to some classic country shows as well lately, and there's all ages in those audiences singing along, and I just think it's fantastic.
And not all music genres can say that.
Right.
Some of them are very narrowly defined.
Right.
And we were talking there after we left the last segment a bit, that artists like Roy Clark, who was a balladeer, had songs that made the pop charts, but his roots were really country. Incredible instrumentalist, banjo player, guitar player. Buck Owens, who wrote these really wonderful sort of honky-tonk kind of songs that everybody could sing along to, as you said, and could get the idea of what he was talking about. And then somebody like a Glenn Campbell, who was sort of mainstreamish, but his roots were country music. He came from the South. incredible instrumentalist, but he sort of also helped America see like, oh, country music is kind of cool in a way.
Right, absolutely.
It wasn't just something, oh, that they only listened to in Alabama or Texas or Florida or Kentucky. It was he made it kind of a more worldwide or a national sort of thing as well.
Yeah, I think in the 70s he was one of the first country artists to cross over into the pop realm.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people do now.
Yeah, and you listen to his songs now, even the ones that you wouldn't necessarily consider country music. There were threads through that we could hear when he especially would play guitar. There was always sort of a country feel to that. You didn't know it at the time, but because it blended so well. Right. But you look at him, he was playing a country-ish sort of feel guitar into his instrumental breaks in his songs like Galveston and you know, things like that. So that kind of eased the way, kind of again that path to where we are today and into the 90s where you have modern country. Somebody like a Waylon Jennings started out with Buddy Holly and the Crickets, so he was rock and roll before he became an outlaw.
Yep.
You know, and that kind of thing. So as you look at where we are right now, where's the next sort of, where do you think we're going to go next with country music? What's the next sort of thing that you see coming?
Well, I kind of hope myself that the bro country or the infusion with hip hop and pop kind of goes away. I really kind of see more of a traditional country coming back. George Strait is back on the charts. Reba McEntire has a new album out.
Okay. Right.
There's, Dolly Parton. She's still really relevant with people.
Sure.
So I kind of feel that shift kind of going back to the traditional country sound. At least I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the RFD channel, which is a cable channel, runs a lot of the older, like Porter Wagner show. Marty Stewart is another one who's is a country artist who is can do almost anything. He can play anything, but his roots are really in traditional country music and gospel to some degree too. And one of the things that we see with the Ken Burns initial episode is how all of those different kinds of music, like gospel, blues, honky tonk, bluegrass, kind of come together to start to make country music and start to move it into a genre all its own, a blending of all of that, which is its great positive is it can take all of that and create this very unique sound, although it can get a little sort of a little diluted as we go along, but that's the one thing that's been nice about it.
That's that's the one thing with country artists too, that they've always stood by, no matter if they're a pop influenced country artist or just a traditional country artist, the God family country, and you still hear a lot of that in music today. And one of the biggest hits that we are playing right now is called God's Country. So it's nice that we're kind of getting back into the what I feel the roots
back to the
of
roots a
country.
little bit. The basis of what country music was and the kind of things that it talks about and that sort of thing. When you look at artists like because somebody like a Kid Rock, who I'm lukewarm on him one way or the other, but he sort of got a foot his sound is sort of country rockish kind of. It's sort of like that, but at the same time, he's not really considered a country artist at all. But yet he sort of stole some of that sound to be that sort of like bro country kind of feel to his music. I guess.
He's kind of dabbling into the country field right now, and doing some shows and with country artists. And in fact, there's a couple of songs of his that we play. So it's just because he has that sound and. People like him. People tend to think that he's a country artist now.
Well, and even and again, I'm going to date myself now, but you look at a group like Leonard Skinner, which you listen to their music. It's really a lot of it's really country sounding,
really
but with a harder edge to it. A little more intense guitar play, but a lot of it sounds. If you strip away the intensity of it a little bit, it's a country song. A lot of those things, and yet, but they've made it sound harder edge to make it sound more rock oriented.
That's kind of where that's kind of where that outlaw country stands right now. Is that sort of sound? There's an artist called Sturgill Simpson that was never really played on the radio, but he won a Grammy.
There you go.
So, and he's the outlaw country.
So it's still there. Well, that's good. Okay. Well, Toni Taylor, thank you so much for coming on from 107.7 The Wolf, and we'll be listening to hear where country music is going now into the teens, into the 2020s before too long. So good. Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see one more clip from Ken Burns Country Music, and you can check us out, of course, at WBGU.org and watch us every week here on WBGU-TV Public Television. So we'll see you again next time here on The Journal.
It's been a million different things in a million different ways. That's the beauty of it.
When I heard Ken Burns was doing a series on country music, I knew it would be the best film ever done on country music.
When Ken Burns turns his lens onto your corner of the world, you know it's going to be done thoroughly, with a lot of integrity and lovingly.
As a country music community, we were all beyond excited when we found out he was interested enough in what we've done to come and do this. This is a huge thing for us.
They screened the film for a bunch of us, and at the end of it, we were all sobbing. There was something about having that presented from a historical point of view that just brought the past up to the present.
There's lots of famous country acts who are involved in this monumental piece of work to celebrate what country music is and can be and is continuing to be.
If you think country music is just one thing, you're missing the whole deal. It's this incredible, crazy quilt of Americana and American music.
So many characters, so many great singers and songwriters. I'm just glad that this one will be out there because I feel like it's going to be the one that someone says, I want to learn more about country music. I don't know what country music is. You kind of can steer them towards this particular documentary and be like, this is the one to check out.
I hope that it turns an entirely different generation of people onto country music and to find out what its richness is and how deeply rooted in the American story country music is.
I think PBS is the perfect place for a series like this. It is available for everyone, for all walks of life, kind of like country music is. I think it's such an important documentary. Everyone in our country music family feels like it's going to get told right.